The past year certainly has not been easy. With the current COVID-19 pandemic, we've been tested physically and mentally, having to deal with a range of emotions and still try remaining positive after all. Almost a year later, with our emotions still being tested, we chat to Dr. D on how we can remain mentally positive during these difficult times. We also have Nicole Austin joining us in studio again as our health correspondent. Nicole, it's always lovely having you.
It's great to be here and talking about such a topical issue. This is not just COVID, this is a mental health pandemic.
Absolutely, and speaking to Dr. D, our clinical psychologist, there's no doubt that the past year has tested us all, from job losses, pay cuts, and the health of our loved ones. But how does the pandemic such as this affect one mentally?
Look, there is a mental health pandemic, and the emotions and the anxiety is as contagious, actually. And it's been sparked a lot by a whole lot of uncertainty. You know, people don't know when the future is. There is hope now on the horizon with the vaccine, and it's certainly, people are becoming a little bit more optimistic, but it's been hugely, hugely challenging. Personally, relationally, familiarly, and societally. And you spoke about losses. You know, when there's loss, there's grief, and there's been loss on a number of fronts. Loss of jobs, loss of money, loss of certainty, loss of predictability, loss of a sense of self even for having to take up different roles. You know, loss of connection, loss of physical contact. So all of these losses have generated a lot of issues concerned with mental health. And if you had a predisposition before and you had any mental health challenges before, the chances are that these have become exaggerated, and also different issues have been generated in all of us. There's been an increase in the divorce rate. There's been a definite increase in anxiety and depression across the board, even with children. And the fear and uncertainty is just causing havoc. I want to say that some of that is a normal reaction to a hugely traumatic situation. How are you expected to feel in the face of all of this? Yeah. But it has got out of control. And by out of control, meaning that it affects your functioning, it affects the way you relate to other people, and it affects your capacity to work. And if that persists, if there's duration and extent with those kind of things, then you have to seek some kind of professional help or connect with one of the many helplines that have just sprung up and been of real assistance to so many people.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. This pandemic has thrown us into a completely different social paradigm, and we've been removed from our social connections. And I think this has had a devastating effect on us psychologically. You know, it's almost like a switch has gone off, and you know, we're now in a dark place socially. And being in this dark place mentally, socially, dealing with the stress and anxiety, how does that start to affect someone's overall health and well-being?
Nicole, I like the way you're talking about it. You know, do we have to adapt to this new normal? The danger is that there's going to be a huge increase in post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's often because the reactions that we've been talking about and the emotions that you mentioned in the beginning, that our natural tendency is just to kind of push them down, to say, listen, it'll be better in the morning, or I'm having a bad day, or everyone else around me seems to be coping better than I do, which generates, an addition to the feeling, it makes you feel inadequate and not good enough and shameful, as well as the feelings that you are experiencing. So there is a danger of the development of post-traumatic stress disorder if these emotions aren't dealt with. And we say the first thing is you have to name it to tame it. If you want to tame it, you have to name it. So counterintuitively, instead of trying to say, I'm okay, Jack, I'll be fine, or it's just a stage, you actually have to confront those emotions and recognize what you're feeling like. To heal it, you've got to feel it. You have to face it in order to embrace it. These may be slick one-liners, but they're really true.
Dr. D, then what can we do quite practically to deal with our stresses, anxiety and depression during these difficult times, more than just, you know, those catchy one-liners?
There are quite a lot of skills, strategies, reaching out mechanisms that you can do to prevent the development of post-traumatic stress, and maybe even to promote some possibility of post-traumatic growth, possibility that we might have learned something from this. But before we go into that, I want to say everyone's talking about new normal. I prefer to talk about now normal instead of new normal, because I think that it's a normal for now. I don't think that we have to adapt to all of this forever for the long term. I think there are things that we can take away. But, I mean, we are going to be able to have physical contact again. We are going to be able to go back to our jobs again, you know, maybe not in exactly the same way, but it's not as if we have to kind of reinvent ourselves forever. It's what's going on now.
Dori, we know that it's important to always stay positive. How can we mentally try and remain positive?
I think that's a very important question. Partly because I have a problem with positive. You know, in the beginning, we were getting all these emails, you remember, and the WhatsApp. Yeah, there are dolphins in the canals of Venice. Can't you see that the sky is so much clearer? There are lots of birds. In other words, just be positive. And, you know, don't worry about what you're going through. Keep the positivity. And sometimes that meant for some people a denial of going through what they needed to go through, to seek the help, the healing power of support, not necessarily from professionals, but finding your tribe. You know, who do you talk to and how do you talk to them? You listen to understand, you don't listen to respond. You listen without being an echo chamber. You know, that kind of support is essential. Self-compassion is essential. Things like good nutrition and sleep and exercise are essential, and most especially establishing a routine is essential because it compartmentalizes your day in a way that is more predictable when the outside is so unpredictable. But in order to do these things, you have to say, I am going through a lot. So are many other people. What am I going through? And what are some of the skills and strategies I can employ to prevent the kind of build-up that might manifest later on as post-traumatic stress if I don't have the permission and the time and the space to deal with what I'm dealing with now.
Absolutely, Dr. D. I think that you have quite eloquently ticked all the boxes when it comes to helping us practically manage our stresses and anxiety. And I mean, Nicole, wouldn't you agree, as a pharmacist and someone, you know, as a health correspondent, everything Dr. D is saying?
Completely, and I think it's this fine balance that we have to find, that yes, we need to focus on hope and positivity, but also out of the pain that we've all gone through, we've certainly developed a large amount of resilience, and that makes us tougher and stronger and able to handle other challenges which are inevitable with life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. D. This conversation was so incredibly impactful and powerful here on Afternoon Express. We definitely appreciate it. Goodbye.
Great pleasure.
Do you have a survival story? Well, we want to hear from you. Please do share your survival story with us, from surviving a failed parachute to escaping a lion attack. We want to hear your story. Immuenza is giving away 5,000 Rand a week for 5 weeks. And all you have to do is reply to the Immuenza competition post on the Afternoon Express Facebook page or Twitter page and tell us your survival story and what protected you using that hashtag Immuenza. The competition closes tonight, the 3rd of March, 2021 at midnight, and terms and conditions can be found on afternoonexpress.co.za. Help support your immune system for your next big adventure with Immuenza.